And now we've got movie-centric questions. And even though I know the answer, I thought this would be something to kind of bring more under the public eye as like a cool discussion. How would you have changed the first drag race of the first film? Like, from reading your book, the thing that stood out to me was the whole danger to manifold sequence. How the suggestion that that you brought up was, instead of having danger to manifold, having a floor pan explode and fly out the back of the car, you suggested having a hose from one of the nitrous tanks go loose and fly around so that you had that mid-race intensity.
So there was a lot of things about that race. First off, I was debating the fact that they were painting lines on the street that already had lines. But I didn't see that until on set. That wasn't actually in the script. The dialogue that was going on and what was happening inside the car didn't make sense to me. There was several discussions about that. What ultimately happened was, I have a script. I've actually just pulled my script out to put new tabs in it today, the old script, and I still have the handwritten notes in the thing. The part where they were talking about you fried your piston rings, there's a line through there that says, you're lucky you didn't kick a rod out of the block, that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of technical things that I asked to be changed but didn't get changed. Because, again, I'm an advisor. The whole danger to manifold thing was ridiculous. Now, I said to them, overboost, danger, overboost, because it's a turbocharger, right? How much are you boosted? And dialogue was in there in one of the script note changes that I made, talking about how much boost is it making. It's making 20 psi, 20 pounds of boost, whatever. So what Rob said to me directly was, you got to remember, this movie is not made for people who know a lot about cars. This is for a 16-year-old kid in the middle of the country in Kansas or wherever, knows nothing about cars, but understands, a flashing light and danger or something on the thing. I said, well, if they don't understand, overboost, how are they going to understand manifold? Whatever. Okay, you win some fights, you lose some fights. The thing about the car blowing the welds on the intake of the manifold and all that kind of shit, I had suggested several terms for that. But the whole thing about the car breaking at the end, my biggest problem I had with that was the floor pan falls out and the motor blows, but somehow he's able to run from the cops. So when I brought that up, I said, basically, look, all you got to do is you show a nitrous pressure gauge in the trunk, right? And you don't have to show the numbers, which nitrous gauges usually have a PSI number, 0, it goes up to 1200 or 900 or whatever it is. Just show a gauge that goes into the red. When it goes into the red and the pegs, any idiot knows that means that's too much. Whatever pressure's in there is too much. And then have the hose pop off, right, which it's not really run like that, but you could do it in special effects. And have the hose come out. When nitrous comes out of a hose, it's minus 125 degrees centigrade. It could frost up the windshield. He can't see. And he's fighting the genie behind the back, the genie coming out of the blah, 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 fighting around the loose fire hose or whatever it is. And it's not terminal. It just means he loses power and Dom wins the race. Seems pretty simple to me. Nope, that's not what they wanted to do. So I lost that argument. And then when the floor pan came off the car, they saw these guys at car shows who were using those shitty APC diamond plate floor mats for the inside of their cars. It's, if you look at GTR floor mats from the late 90s, early 2000s, it was kind of a classy checkerboard, slightly two-tone black and darker black kind of material. But there were other types of floor. But people were putting diamond, $20 diamond plate floor mats in show cars. Were to blame for that because the producer saw that at a show, so we're going to do that. So they interpreted that to mean that the car actually had no floor mat and it was just a diamond plate floor, which, of course, nobody does that unless you're in a sand rail or something. But that's what they did. And it fell off the car. And I said, where is Vin Diesel going to put his feet when he's inside the car? Because now he's going to be dangling out like Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, that was an interesting one that I always thought was quite fascinating with that moment. But it's not something you necessarily think about as like a kid or like the people that he said that the movie was aimed at. Like I basically grew up with that movie probably from like the age of 3 or 4, and then went on to that, and only when I turned got to like my teenage years that I started to go, something's not adding up. Like once you start to familiarize yourself with cars, even if it's because of the movie, then when you come back to the movie, you go, I have concerns. which is probably what people were experiencing for those that were already gearheads or automotive enthusiasts or petrol heads, depending on where you are. And you watch that movie for the first time and you go, what?
Well, the first time I saw it, I was sitting in the theater, the Albert Hitchcock Theater on Universal's back lot. It was a special invitation for the owners of the cars. Rob Cohen was sitting there with a few other people whose names escape me. I don't remember everybody who was there. But R.J. DeVere and I were sitting close to each other. The other, we played Danny Yamato, the other technical advisor on that film. And Danger to Manifold, my row of people, my buddies, we were laughing like, what? And Rob comes over and taps me on the shoulder and goes, why are people laughing? I said, because we're a little off on some of this dialogue here. Can we fix this? I don't know how we're going to fix it. But don't worry, nobody's going to know. And then Rob and I had a discussion outside. And I said, you know what? You know what you're doing. It's your movie. This is my first movie I've ever worked on. I'm in no position to counsel you. I'm just saying that if, as far as accuracy goes, that's not accurate. But if you think it's going to be okay, then I trust your judgment. Rob's a brilliant guy.
I know this is a question I've seen you answer a lot on various platforms, but despite having little to no direct contact with him, what was it like to work with Paul Walker? Well,
I had the privilege of traveling with him a little bit. Universal sent us out to make appearances at certain car shows. We did one up in Cow Palace, which is up by San Francisco, South San Francisco. It was a hot import nights or an import show off, and so he brought his R34 that he had just bought, a silver one, up there. We did, I think it was import show off or hot import nights down in Del Mar. We did the LA Auto Show. A couple of others I'm missing. One up in Seattle. So I got to travel with him, have breakfast with him this morning. I actually met his daughter and his daughter's mama when she was about two and a half maybe. So he was literally a baby, right? He's a toddler. He was a cool guy. He was just down to earth. He liked to talk about cars. We got a lot of time to talk about cars. When we went to some of these places, nobody knew who he was. Like this new movie's coming out called The Fast and the Furious, and this is the guy who drives it. People had just seen the commercials at that point. And so they did. I just remember standing in line and somebody saying, now, who is this guy? Somebody next to me was like, who is this guy? And I had explained to him who he was. Fast forward several years, different story, of course. But
right.
He was down to earth, liked to talk about cars, and I talked to him about acting. He said, I didn't really do much studying on him before that. How do you like acting? He says, well, I'm not really an actor. What do you mean? Because they keep paying me to put me in movies. So, I like guns, I like surfing, I like cars. So if it's about any one of those three subjects, I'll probably be in. And they keep paying me. Interesting.
This one is another heavily covered thing, but just for people that are, first coming to the discussion. I thought it'd be good to kind of discuss why street racing was dropped from the franchise. You and I have already talked a lot about this. It's in your book and other things like that. But I thought it'd be like just a good thing to touch on, because whenever I see a commercial for the newest movie or this, that, and the other, someone always says it's not like the old movie, or I wish they brought back racing and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, well, I did a video on this about bring straight racing back to the Fast and Furious franchise, and then I gave several reasons for it. I had done a video on that more than a year and a half ago, which is also on my YouTube. But essentially, it comes down to this. First movie was about street racing. It made $211 million. Second movie was not about street racing, and it made $236 million, but had no Vin Diesel and nobody else in the cast. Tokyo Drift was 100% about street racing, but it had none of the cast and only made $159 million. So it was this level, then went to here, and then it nosedived. So then they said, okay, we got to bring Vin Diesel back, which means we got to bring back some of the other characters as well. But Fast and Furious 4 still had some kind of racing in it. There was the audition race and all that kind of stuff. There was still some street racing, and then the whole drug cartel money and all that. By Fast and Furious 5, this was around 2010, Vin Diesel gave an interview that said basically, we are now to the point where we are like saving the world stuff. So street racing just doesn't fit into that culture. We're trying to put something in there like which is the one they did the race in Puerto Rico? I think that was 7, or was it 8?
Is that the one where he drives backwards?
Yeah.
I think that was, if Fate of the Furious was 8, I think that was it.
All right. Well, and essentially what he said was that they've moved so far beyond that now that if they put anything in there at all, it would only be an homage to what, the grassroots of how this whole thing got started.
Right.
But Mike Fertrell, I mean, the studio heads, if you have to watch the video, there's two people, the studio heads, I can't remember the names off my top of my head. When they wanted to reboot the franchise for Fast 5, they basically said street racing just doesn't have a place in this because we have moved beyond that now. Now it's super villains, and it's still a car movie because they have a ton of beautiful cars in the movie that you'll see nowhere else usually. But it's beyond that now. It's about the family. The family is the core theme. Saving the family, rescuing the family, becoming part of the family, getting kicked out of the family. Any one of those storylines will work for a Fast movie. But street racing, the number of people around the globe who care about street racing is a minuscule proportion of the population. There's 8 billion people on this planet, okay? You take a look at somebody like 1320 Videos who does a great job covering street racing, real true action, characters and people talking, real people doing stuff. Their videos average about 300,000 views per video, okay? Hardly enough to build a franchise around 300,000 views. But you may say, well, they doesn't have Vin Diesel in it and Paul Walker and all that. Vin Diesel is 52 years old. Not a lot of 52-year-old dudes hanging out at the street races. And I know I'm going to get mail saying, hey, man, I'm 50 years old and I go to street races. And I just say to myself, okay, great. You live in a little rural town in some backwater locations, not downtown LA or anything like that. But if that's what you can do and get away with it, great. It's just not enough of attraction. How do you build a 2-hour story around street racing? It's a bunch of your friends talking trash in your garage, why your car's slow, why you're slow, whatever. And then you go out to the drag races and your car runs 8 seconds or it runs 16 seconds. It's hard to build a movie plot around that. So as much as we would like to see it, it's just not going to happen, man. It's just not an integral part of the storyline anymore. Now, I have a petition online, as you probably saw. So I posted a petition in my video. I posted on my Instagram. As of last time I checked last week, and it had 7,500 signatures. Now, I have the direct contact name in the public relations department at Universal. I have his email and his phone number. Now, if I got 2 million signatures on that, you bet your ass I would send that thing in. 7,500 signatures on it, he's going to go, yeah, next. Yeah. So everybody says they want to see street racing come back. When it comes down to taking action, nobody wants to do it. That's it.
Okay. And of course, and there's 2 parts to this last final question, and then we can kind of go on tangent to discuss anything that you want to discuss or anything like that, or we can finish. But why were certain cars picked over others? We can discuss things like availability, cost, or even sponsor deals you might have with certain manufacturers. Because a lot of people ask me things like, why didn't you use more R33s in the first movie? Why did Tyrese's car end up being an Eclipse when it could have been something like an MR2? That was something that someone said. So I thought it would just be cool to touch on that for people that don't quite know.
Good questions, really good questions. So I'm going to talk about Fast 1 first because it's different, okay? Fast 1, we were working on very low budget. We had less than $2 million to spend for everything related to picture cars. Buying cars, painting cars, fixing cars, putting gas in them, tires, wheels, brakes, repair, transportation of the cars to and from set, fixing the cars, all that other stuff, spare parts and all that. So we had to work with what we could get, So in one of the videos I did, I talked about how we picked the cars. Basically, I made recommendations for cars. For example, Brian was at one point they were talking about 3000 GT and the Z32 300ZX, which we ruled out. Eventually settled on the Supra. So they picked my car, which was very early on in the production. The second car they wanted to put him into was a 240SX. That was even in the script. It says 240SX. The problem with that is that he was going backwards. Again, this was the second conversation about going through the food chain. Yeah, and Letty was supposed to be in an Eclipse. I said, let's switch it around. I have the note. I have to figure out how I'm going to scan that document or make a video out of it. Anyway, so as we discussed about what cars we wanted to use, they wanted to see cars. So every Friday for 6 weeks, I was asked to hold a casting call on Universal's back lot where they did the Back to the Future thing, that square, right over in that area. So, okay, well, today we want to look at Eclipses. So I called everybody I knew. This was before Facebook, before YouTube, before Instagram, before Snapchat, before Twitch, before Twitter, before all that. So the only way I had to do it is call up people I knew who knew other people. We're going to make it a movie called Red Line, because that's what it was called. Bring your car up if you want to be considered for a movie. It was like, yeah, right, you're full of shit. So whatever eclipses showed up got considered. Okay, if they didn't show up, they didn't get considered. Period. End of sentence. No further discussion. We were on a tight timeline. I wanted an M3. The E46 M3 wasn't out yet. It was just a couple of months away coming out. So we tried to get an E36 M3. Got a white plane one up there. They were bored with it. We brought up all kinds of stuff. We would show them MR2s. I wanted an SW20 or a MR2 in the first movie. 240 Essex had to be in the movie. FDRX7 had to be in the movie. What else am I missing? Honda Civics had to be in the movie. Acura Integra had to be in the movie. These are the cars of the day. 3000 GT be ruled out for the obvious reason because it's on par with a Supra and it needs to be down a peg or two so as not to upstage brand Supra. R33, we showed them an R32 and an R33. We couldn't get the cars from Motorex. There was no way to get them. Back then, we would have to buy all those cars. Motorex wasn't going to loan us the cars. Even if we only used one car, it just wasn't going to happen as a main car in the movie. So we were lucky to get the one car that they had, and we used it for Leon's scenes. 2 scenes, drives up to the tuna no crust thing, or 3, then doing the parts drive when they're picking up parts for the car, and then the street race. And then I don't think we really see that car again unless I'm mistaken.
I think it only shows up at one more time at Race Wars.
Yeah, maybe part 3. Yeah, you're probably right. So it was a matter of money and availability and accessibility. If these cars were available and people would rent them to us, that's great because they weren't going to go out and buy these cars and spend time doing engine mods and big brakes and custom interiors and audio video systems. It was just beyond their budget. So if they rent the Hero car, tint the windows on all the Hero cars really dark so that if the windows are up, even on the backup cars, you can't tell that the backup car doesn't have all the real stuff. Like the Eclipses, for example, notice how dark the windows were? That's because we couldn't use real Gretty gauges. We took a Xerox copy of the face of a Gretty gauge, cut it out on a piece of paper, made a vacuum form molding of the A-pillar gauge pod, and glued that piece of paper onto the gauge pods. Okay? We make fiberglass replicas of LCD screens in cars and stick them in there.
Huh.
So that's movie met. The amplifiers, same thing. They would make a vacuum mold of it, paint it the same color, and stick it in there.
That's cool. Yeah, one of my favorite examples of the stunt cars is the Eclipse that they used for the Saigon, I believe. That scene where the car is blown up.
Yeah.
And where they basically used a certain type of glass. They stripped out the entire interior, no engine, nothing like that. They had like a canister of some kind of mixture that I probably shouldn't talk about on the internet. And they put it around the car's center of gravity so that it would launch straight up in the air. That's what I remember.
Yeah, so they have a barrel welded in there. It's in the center of the gravity, the center of gravity of the car. And the barrel's about, I want to say, maybe 16, 18 inches wide. And it's steel, and they set off a charge air cannon with a pole in it or wherever they want to do it. You know, you use a pole that's driven down as a pylon, what do you call it? Like pile drive it to catapult the car up in the air. So it could be done with air or it could be done with chemicals. They light the car on fire first. They have gas tubes in there. They light the car on fire first. The windshield things are done with poppers. They have these little devices that are inside attached to the windshield, and they spring out a sharp prong and pop the glass. So there are all sorts of things that they do with squibs and all sorts of stuff. I did a video on how the Eclipse explosion was done. But when the door springs open, they have these vinyl-covered cables, steel cables with eyelets at the end, attached one to the chassis and one to the door so the door doesn't fly off. It just swings open, but doesn't fly off. And if you watch this behind the scene special effects story on videotape, you can actually see the cable. It's not in the final version. I think they CGI'd it out. But that's the way it was done. But the windows were really dark. No seats, no interior, nothing. Even the dash was gone. It just had steel bars going across. And all that steel bar stuff is put in there for rigidity so the car will fly the right way. And when it comes down, it doesn't break into 1,000 pieces.
Right. Cool. And, of course, in the second film, if I remember correctly, you had a somewhat bigger budget than the first movie.
We did. I don't remember what the picture car was, but it was considerably larger. That movie, the first movie was made on a $39 million budget, and the second movie was made on an $85 million budget. Part of that is because we moved a few hundred people from California to Florida for several months, so there was all that housing cost, but be that as it may. So cars changed there too. You know, we were asked to build NSXs, so we went out and bought, I think, 4 of them. And we went out and bought MRSs to have as a main person. All right, so changing cars. We had on script several different cars that didn't get used. The MRS, or MR2, as we call it in the US, it's called the MRS in Japan. Got those, and we had Veilside body kits. At that time, you can clearly see that we had a big relationship with Veilside already. Mm-hmm. The NSXs we got, they were originally going to be for 2 of Carter Verone's goons, because we were trying to do import cars, but there was a lot of changes going on, and there's several videos where I kind of spread that information out. The NSXs wind up going to Tej, but since Tej wasn't going to be doing anything stunt related, we basically got 1 car, and we used 2 of the other cars that we painted and kitted as background cars for the warehouse scramble scene. The MRS, the same thing. They were going to be for one of Campo's Carter Verone's drivers. So we would need 4 cars because we would do freeway stunts with it, right? But that got shot down. So we repurposed the cars, and I painted them each a different color. One was silver, one was candy red, one was blue. I don't remember if we painted the 4th car. I think we did, but I'd have to look at my notes. And those were used for Race Wars Scramble scene. The Eclipse Spider, oh, don't even get me started on that car. Okay, I got to preface this by saying, look, even at the time, I was in my early 30s at that time, I was not a dude who was into the dub chrome wheels on a tuner car. That was not me. To me, it was always those wheels belong on old Monte Carlos or Cadillac Escalades. So I wasn't the target audience. So putting that bias aside, it came down to we're going to need another car. So they said, okay, let's do an Eclipse. But we can't use the same type of Eclipse from the last one because this is Brian's sidekick, right? So for some reason, they wanted a Mitsubishi in there. And the reason why is, what most people don't know, is because it's complex. Let me start from the beginning. They wanted a neon, Dodge wanted a neon SRT4 in the movie, right? That was going to be one of Brian's make cars. After I got them to say, no, this is probably not a good idea, they went another way. The Skyline became the number 1 car, and then the Mitsubishi, because Dodge was still working with Mitsubishi at the point, Mitsubishi got involved, shipped us 4 rally cars that were on their way to Europe. That became Brian's second car, which I argued it should be the other way around. Evo first, then the Skyline, but whatever. So Mitsubishi wanted to get as much in the movie as they could. So we got Mitsubishi Eclipse Spiders, and we decided we're going to modify them. And if you look around, when I was told that, I had to get on the internet and start looking around for performance parts for a Mitsubishi Eclipse Spider. They were like nothing. So Shine Street made a body kit, which was better than stock, and we did the car. It was Pavo Purple was the color that was picked up by the art department. I had nothing to do with that choice. Primary colors were supposed to be the thing, but a lot of cars, like the Skyline, got painted silver. I was like, what? Why didn't you just leave it blue? It's a primary color. What are you doing? So purple was the color that they picked, and so Eddie Paul came up with some graphics of the spider web, which was ugly as shit. The interior was bright yellow. The first interior was yellow suede, literally yellow suede. Everything, the dash, the seat fronts, the seat backs, everything, yellow door panels, yellow suede. We, of course, counseled against this because after you get stunt drivers getting out of the car a few times, the car's going to be black. It didn't matter. Tyrese saw the car and he said, oh, hell no, I ain't driving no Lakers mobile. And the whole thing got redone. He found a paint job he liked on a car that was at a car show up in Central Florida, showed us to us from a magazine. They decided to repaint the graphics on the car and came up with the airbrush stuff. 4 cars were painted in 4 days, which I got to tell you was no easy feat because it's all airbrush stuff. And then the interiors got redone at the same time. We sent them down to a little shop called Shamrock Auto Upholstery down in South Florida. And they had to do 4 interiors, including dash tops, by taking the dash out of the car in 5 days. And they did it.
Oof.
That's the car. And then Tyrese personally hand-selected the giant chrome Lowenhart BR5s, which wound up costing the production about $40,000 for us, 4 sets, for the sets that we needed. $40,000 for wheels.
That's a lot.
Okay, again, I got to stress to your viewers again, A technical advisor, the key word in that title is advisor. Okay, you give advice. They can tell you, "Thank you for your advice. Go get bent," or they can tell you, "Yes, I like your advice. Let's do something like that." It's one or the other. You can't take it personally. So there was a couple times I almost walked off the set, though. Honestly, in that second movie, with some of the stunts, there was musical chairs with some of these cars. We bought a bunch of Shelby Cobras. They decided, "Oh no, we're not going to use that now. We're going to replace it with an NSX." Okay, so we go get 4 NSXs. It was just chaos. It was chaos. But the producers have a say, the director has a say, the picture car team has a lot of the say. They make, because the picture car team is responsible for making suggestions of what cars might work in these roles because they're the experts. And working in the picture car department, there was a lot of those discussions. There's several people sitting in that same office that I occupied who had decades of experience with cars. And so you make the suggestions and figure out, look, you read the script, figure out what car might fit for a particular character. Some of them, they got it right on target, for example. I mean, a lot of people don't know that the Dodge Charger in the first movie was supposed to be an early 90s Buick Regal, which is a front-wheel drive 3.1-liter V6. And it's even written into one of the scripts like that, the early scripts. It's written in like that. So that car almost never happened. The Dodge Charger almost never happened.
Quick question. I can't quite remember his name off the top of my head. The person who designed a lot of the decals for the cars, at least in the first movie.
Troy Lee did several of the graphics. He did the cars that had the airbrush layered graphics. So that would include the Maxima, the Supra, the FDRX7, most of the main hero cars. I'm trying to think if there's one that he didn't design. I'd have to get back to that. I don't remember the top of my head. But all these gladiators and robot warriors or whatever you want to call them, like I said on my Supra, it was a Trojan war helmet. And then somebody told me, you need an Urban Dictionary, the phrase Trojan war helmet. It's not what you think it is. And if you do that after this video, you're going to text me back and say, OMG. Anyway, long story short, there was one, the Maxima, what a lot of people don't realize is that the Austin Powers movie came out in 1996. And if you remember Austin Powers, he said, I want sharks with laser beams coming, for the eyes, right? The Maxima graphic was a shark with a laser beam coming out of its eyes. So I feel like Troy Lee was going like, was talking to stuff, I'm out of ideas for these graphics because I've got everything. Naked ladies riding rockets, which isn't phallic and sexual in reference or suggestion. Trojan war helmet, nuclear gladiators, pocket rocket missiles, anything phallic and any kind of reference. I'm out of ideas. Dude, you know what'd be funny? You see Austin Powers? Let's do a shark with freaking laser beams coming out of its eyes. Let's do it. And that wound up in the Maxima. People wonder why I took the graphics off the cars. But to Troy's credit, Troy was brilliant because you had to design these cars with graphics that you would not see on any of the background cars back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Everybody was running graphics on their cars, and everybody pretty much followed the same thing. It's flames, it's tribal, it's barbed wire, it's bubbles, it's splashes, it's scallops, or whatever it is. Everybody was doing that. So how do you as a designer come up with something that's unique without ripping off and getting into licensing problems with manga comics or anime or anything like that, any of the stuff from Japan? How do you do that? So he had to design it. It was no easy job. And you can I'll tell you what, none of those cars on set got confused with any of the background cars. There's no way. Bright colors and then off the beaten path kind of graphics. He did it. He nailed it.
I think the interest.
And now,
sorry, go ahead.
After the movie, RJ and I were laughing about it. It's like, oh my God, these graphics are horrible, horrible, horrible. Says, yeah, God, you'll never see that in real life. And then, the first time we started seeing it on social media, several years later, 8 or 10 years later, it's like, have you seen this? People are starting to copy the graphics from the first movie, and I'm like, OMG. It just proves my point that if it's on the big screen, there are people who want to emulate that, right? It explains the Kardashians' whole career. But I don't know, man. It was what it was, but now it's just nostalgia. So people are just reliving it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool because I think a lot of people that are also growing up with those movies have started to be able to have their own cars and do those sorts of things, and because I'm one of those people. I don't know if I'm going to try and emulate to the letter. There are a lot of people out there that do some very incredible replicas of cars that sounds like more work than just building a car, because you have to source a lot of parts that are discontinued, and if you're trying to get things correct, it can be very complicated. It's more I like the style, the both sides of the coin. You've got the stuff that Troy Lee did, but I also like the stuff that's actually prototypical to the era. So kind of stuff that you have on your car, and the way you had your Supra before it was in the film. I kind of like both sides of the coin. I like the crazy, unique, new era, but I also kind of like the old, almost kind of forgotten era of the 90s, early 2000s when it comes to tuner cars.
And that's the evolution also includes the fact that you're going to force to evolve because a lot of those manufacturers are out of business. I get dozens of emails a week from people, 16-year-olds, who think that their parents are going to buy them an R34 GTR when they get their driver's license, and they want the parts list so they can go start building their R34 GTR as a movie car, which of course is not realistic. Number one, your parents are not buying you an R34 GTR unless they're a sheik and you live in Dubai. Number two, even if your parents were rich in the United States, not many parents are dumb enough to give a 16-year-old a 270 horsepower all-wheel drive car that they know they're going to funkify and modify and make 800 horsepower. But beyond that, there's the fact that these parts are just not available. You know, the HRE 446 wheels, there's only a handful of sets in the world that fit that car, and they stopped making them 16 years ago. The Eclipse wheels stopped making them 16 years ago. The owner of the company is a personal friend of mine. He was best man at my wedding. He told me point blank, we've made 500 sets of those wheels in total across all sizes and all fitments. So it's a total of 500 wheels floating, or 500 sets of wheels, which is 2,000 wheels, and not all of them fit the Eclipse. So if you're going to go out and buy an Eclipse and see if you think you're going to buy the body kit, you're going to buy a replica of a kit that was a replica of another kit. Okay? And those things fit like shit. And if you think that you're going to go out and buy the wheels, good luck. If you think you're going to find the actual APR wing, you can find wings that are kind of close, but with movie cars, if replicas, if you don't put exactly the right part on it, I mean exactly, you're going to get roasted mercilessly. Mercilessly. And then these kids go out and buy eBay decals, which are for the cars, which are garbage. They're not even close. Any person who's seen the cars in real life or seen pictures of the real cars will tell you they're not even close. And they spent $159. And so what they're putting together is a car that has a couple of the parts that are close, usually bad workmanship. The interior stuff is not done. The engine stuff isn't done, and they're calling it a replica. It's really more of a tribute. If you can live with that, knock yourself out. But if you think you're going to build that car for $8,000, you're smoking crack, because building a proper Eclipse is going to cost you $30,000. Easy to do it right. And building a Skyline GT, the R34, $150 plus. Just getting the car. Even if you bought a Roach illegal car in the United States, you're going to pay $80,000 for the car.
Right. And then more for the tampered VIN tag.
Yeah, and then when it gets seized by the feds and crushed. But yeah, it's not easy. I have great respect for these people who have built some great replicas. Price Hep down in South Florida has this beautiful turbocharged 4G63 Eclipse, where it's built the way the movie car should have been built. Superb paint, front mount intercooler, 4G63 turbo, interior done, lowered suspension, proper wheels on it. It's just gorgeous. You sell that car for, I think, $30,000. You couldn't build one even close to that quality for that amount of money. So if somebody's looking for a really good Eclipse, the thing with about $30,000 24-year-old car is that most banks aren't going to finance you unless you go out and get a personal loan because you have a 700 credit score. And I don't think I had a 700 credit score when I was 20 years old. You're just starting to build credit at that point. So it'd be pretty difficult. You pretty much have the cash. And if you've got $30,000 burning a hole in your pocket, I'm pretty sure you're not going to go buy a 25-year-old movie car replica. You probably put it down on a new M4 or something like that.
Right.
So it's a challenge to build these replica cars, but there's a lot. Plus, there's so many Eclipses floating around. So many. At last count, there were 75 Eclipses I saw that were reasonably close. But I will caution you this: if you're going to go out and buy the super decals and put them on your Toyota Corolla, you are what's wrong with this world. Please don't do that. Stop doing that. We admire your passion, but just put a little sticker in your window that says the Fast and the Furious.
Hey, sweetie. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like, why are you still in there?
She just got home.